What are you working on?
I don't know. Dirt?
You usually paint with so much color. Why are you looking at me like that?
So you just saw a clip from Dear Jenna, and sitting next to me right now is the writer and director of that film, Danna Gilbertson, and we're very happy to have Danna here.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
So good to see you again. For those who don't know, I first met Danna on a short film called The Clearing, which you can actually see on YouTube now. That's public. So when you go to watch this, you can watch that right afterward. So some shameless self-promotion there. But this is going to be about you. So I want to get right into it. You have been a writer, director, actor, all kinds of different things. Talk about all of the roles you have played on set and sort of which ones you most resonate with or see yourself as first.
For sure. I do a whole collection of them. I was a writer first. Writing is kind of my first love, I like to say. I picked it up in middle school, and then I picked up more specifically screenwriting in the end of high school. But my first time on set, on a film set, I did the classic PA. And then Wes Johnson was actually the writer on that. And then he had a longer form short film that he was filming, and he said, hey, you want to come on and you want to be a second AD under me? I'm going to first AD. And I said, okay. And then we got to that set and then decided he wasn't going to AD and that I was going to give it a shot. And then since then, I've done a ton of AD work. That's probably the role I'm kind of most known for currently is AD for assistant director. But I still write and I direct. And I've started to dip my toes in acting a little bit. So you pretty much summarize it well at the beginning. That's pretty much what I do.
Cool. Yeah, that actually...
Lots of hats.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. So that kind of plays into, not the next point I had on the list, but I'm going to skip over that and come back because it plays into the one below that, which is... So you said you've worked with Wes. You've worked with Wes consistently, I think, on multiple projects.
So, yep.
And so I'm sure there's other people you see on set all the time because I know Wes works with a lot of the same people as well. Talk about what the difference is between working with new people and working with the same people. Is there a different dynamic? What do you think?
There's definitely a certain comfortability when you're working with the same people, and I think there's some value in that because you find the people that just you work really well with, and then finding people that maybe have a similar way of approaching a creative vision as you is a valuable resource to have. Wes is one of those people, and I have a couple other people like that if there's a film that I'm going to make, or if they're making a film, that we just tend to think of each other. It's nice, one, because you're kind of assured that there will be stuff that you get to work on fairly consistently. And two, just it's like you're making films with your friends, and that's always really fun. It's kind of a guaranteed good time on set when that happens. However, on the flip side, I very much enjoy working with new people. I think that filmmakers really, really limit themselves if they continue. And this isn't a judgment on anybody that does that, but I just think that there's so many different creative minds in the Twin Cities and beyond that have different experiences, different skill sets, different creative, just like mental pathways, that the more you can reach out and work with new people, you're widening your like creative space. And I always feel like I become a better filmmaker when I work with new people, in the same way that I still learn from the people I work with all the time. So it requires a mix. I don't just like working with the same people all the time, but I also, I'm not like moving on to new people every single time, if that makes sense. There's value in both.
Yeah,
I would say.
definitely. So when you're, say, writing a script, at this point, now that you've gotten to know a lot of people and have worked with people consistently in this film scene, do you find yourself writing with particular people in mind, or do you write a script for a particular director? What kind of...
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I know people that will write to specific actors that they want to work with, and I am just never really able to do that. And I don't know why that is necessarily. But I don't really write for actors in mind necessarily. I can think of people that I can imagine playing the part, but it's never like I want to work with this actor, so I'm going to write a role for that actor, sort of thing. And it's the same for directors. I'd say often I end up directing what I write. So, that's a little bit of a cheat code there. So, I often think of myself as the director. Because your scripts are like your children, and you want them in good hands, and what better hands than the hands that wrote them?
Right.
So not really. I think my own personal preference is not tying to anything production related while writing. I think that the story tends to just flow a little bit easier for me if it's not tied to anything and it's just tied to itself. So that's what I do. But I know it works the other way for some people. Some people are like, yes, this person, I'm going to write it for you.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
That's a little difficult for me.
Okay. Have you started writing a screenplay that you knew somebody else was going to direct? So, or have you, well, first question, I guess, is have you ever written a screenplay that somebody else has directed? And then subsequent to that, have you written a screenplay where you knew ahead of time that a particular person was going to direct it?
Mm-hmm. I have, my first directing experience, I was co-writing with someone knowing that she at least was going to direct it. She invited me to co-direct with her after that. This was Ali Purdom, The Labyrinth System, available on YouTube. So we co-wrote it, and I knew that she was eventually going to direct it. So I lent a lot to her ideas and kind of what she was thinking the direction would go, just because I knew it would end up in her hands eventually. More recently, Jolanta Young, so sorry if I said your name wrong, Jolanta, but she came to me a couple of times asking for scripts. Both times the story was kind of already there. And so I just kind of refined it, or I took what was already there and rewrote it in with her guidance and with her notes, but more in like what my voice is as a writer and how I thought the story would go and such like that. So it's a different process when you're writing for someone else. I mean, it's still storytelling, but it's not so much like I get to do everything exactly as I want. You know that it's going to someone else. It doesn't change the way that I write necessarily. Okay. But the process of building the story is slightly different in the fact where like I'm checking in with her and saying, here's how this is going. Do you like the direction this is going? Do you not like the direction this is going? But my writing style never really changes. But it is an interesting change to write for someone else. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they give you an idea. Sometimes they give you like, here's a really rough draft of the script I wrote. Will you rewrite it? Yeah, but it's a good, interesting challenge to do that, I would say.
Have you ever done the reverse where you direct a script written by somebody else?
Yeah, I did that through Z-Fest this last year. So I did Dear Jenna, but also Jocelyn Sanchez. For those that know her, she wrote a script called The Girl Next Door, and she was looking for crew and a director, and I found out about it through Penn, who asked me if I was interested in directing, and I said yeah, because that was, Z-Fest last year was my year where I was like, I'm going to not AD and I'm going to do something else. I'm going to direct. Yeah, and it's kind of directing something that you didn't write it's an interesting, different challenge coming from someone who is a writer. Because I wasn't there when the idea was thought up, and I wasn't there when through the first, second, or third draft that it went through. So you receive the script, and there's, the writer, Jocelyn, she acted in it. So I always had her there to kind of check on, is this going the way you want? Or like, what are the ideas you're trying to get across, and work with her on that. But it is a little different when you weren't the writer of it, but you're still receiving it, because you want to honor the writer, but also when you're trusted as the director, you're trusted to tell the story in the way that you also relate to it and build it that way. So, yeah, I've done that too. I like it. I do enjoy it. It's just a different kind of muscle.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah. So I found out the hard way that I can't really ever do that again.
Okay.
Unless I have like extensive prior conversations about what the idea is. So like the Clearing, the short film You Were in Mine, that was actually written by Derek. He's my brother. You can't see him. But so obviously I didn't write it. Someone else wrote it. But the amount of like arguments and conversations we had on the phone ahead of time ultimately got us to find a common ground. I feel like unless you're really close to somebody, you can't be as aggressive in the way that you converse and discuss your ideas. And so you kind of got to lend that other person some independence, and then you get it, and you don't totally vibe with it. And so that was my experience for the 48-hour film festival. Is we actually had a very talented cast and crew, and everybody's fantastic. The writer's fantastic, the actors, cinematographer. As a cohesive, my style mixing with his, mixing with theirs, it wasn't so much.
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I just returned to writing my own stuff.
It is an interesting dance, that type of relationship, because there's the lead, in dancing you have the one that tends to lead the moves, but when you're a writer and director, you both want to lead in a way. So learning how to compromise for that, it is definitely a huge part of that. It works for some, and it obviously doesn't work for other people.
But I'm impressed by people that can do that can like take somebody else's idea and be like, okay, I have a vision for this. Yeah, I guess it's kind of tough for me to do, but it seems like you figured it out. So
yeah, I enjoyed it. I would do it again. I would say, I guess. It's very important to me, if I direct someone else's script, that I feel a connection to that script. It's like you can't tell a story that you don't relate to, and this gets into one of your later questions too. But if I am invited to direct something, it's important to me where I can see the script, have some time with it, and then really evaluate. Does this go with like my brand as I feel like as a filmmaker? Does it go with like the kind of stories I like to tell? And go from there. That helps. Not saying it fixes everything for you, but that, it matters to find stories that resonate with you, even though you didn't write it.
So do you, now having done both writing and directing someone else's script, writing for someone else, having done all of those, do you have a preference now where you're like, I really prefer to just write my own scripts? Or do you say, no, I really prefer to direct somebody else's idea? Do you have any kind of preference, or is it just sort of like, if I vibe with what's there, I'll do it,
I think my preference is still, as much as I have enjoyed and would still do the other options, I think directing what I write still has that special place in my heart for that. Yeah. Just because it's, for me, I prefer that just because I'm not only directing it, but I'm part of, like, I had the idea in the first place. It's on having that idea in the first place, laboring with love through the multiple drafts, and then directing it. You get to be part of the whole journey that way, and that's really special. So that's why I prefer that.
So what is your kind of process as a writer? Because, I know every writer's mind works somewhat differently. Some people are more conceptual and they come up with a concept, and then from there they put in the characters. Some people are like, oh, I have this really cool idea for a central character. Maybe I'll build a narrative around them. What's sort of your creative process when you're writing or beginning a script?
Mine often starts with a character. Whether it's someone, I have a story that was inspired by someone I saw in real life. It was an older man in overalls with no shoes and a big white beard. And I was like, that's story content right there. But otherwise, too, I have a Pinterest. It's one of my best writing resources just for collecting pictures or drawings of different characters. And I use that a lot to pull or get ideas from. And then after establishing the character, it starts with like the general idea of a character, and then what kind of world would they live in, and then back to character to like flesh out what kind of person they are, who they would be in that world. One of the best tips I ever read that saves me when creating characters is that you think about what kind of shoes they would wear. Which have felt really silly when I read it, but it's one of the most valuable tools I feel like I have now in my arsenal. Because what the shoes people wear inform like their style and maybe their lifestyle and their social class and where they live. So writers, try it. It's actually really helpful. And the other thing I do is I come up with their Hogwarts house because I'm a Harry Potter fan, and discerning their Hogwarts house helps establish that character. And then from then on, sometimes you flesh out the world is generally what I do. I create story Bibles too, which they're normally used for TV shows, the show Bibles where it has all the characters laid out and plots and stuff like that. But I guess it's kind of like a pitch deck to what I'm doing with these, but I put my mood board in there, list out my characters. If there's a world I'm building, I put those in there. And then I'll go into outlining. Sometimes I use Save the Cat. Other times I'll just use like a classic outlining format. I just took a writing class where we learned about, glad I'm forgetting this right now, but this person, he had like, there are 8 stages to a film instead. So I'm an outliner. I know some people don't outline. I live by my outlines. And then after I outline, that's when I'll finally open up the page and then crank through that first draft. Sometimes it stays to the outline, sometimes it doesn't, and then from there, edit onward. But so really long rambling way to tell you my process, but that's generally how it goes for me. So
yeah, are you kind of a streaky writer where you gather inspiration and then all of a sudden, like in one night, you write 30 pages, and
sometimes.
Then it's like weeks before you can return to it, or do you typically have a more consistent?
I think I'd like to say I have a more consistent, but streaking is probably more realistic.
Okay.
Yeah, because then the inspiration can be really high, and then usually if you get one really good scene down, it just like flows right into the next one, and then you can crank out a lot of pages. And then if I hit a wall, I like to think sometimes I can force through those walls, which is then when I would be a consistent writer, like you mentioned, but it just doesn't work out like I hope it does. And also I think, if you have deadlines, it's a little different, but if you're forcing through a wall and you aren't actually like feeling any true inspiration, I think sometimes it's okay, but other times then you're just like forcing out stuff that doesn't actually fit or actually isn't super great anyway. So I'm more of the mind that, okay, this obviously isn't happening right now. So we'll just set it aside and come back to it in a couple of days, try again, and then if it still isn't there, come back again. I just finished a feature script.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you.
That's big.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that one was truly like I'd write 25 pages and then I'd be stuck for like a month or so maybe, and then I'd write. But then suddenly, whoo, and then we'd write 30 more, but then you'd get stuck again. So, yeah.
Without disclosing too much, what genre sort of is it in?
This one, it's called The Crack in the Wall. I posted on Instagram recently.
Okay.
But it's a dystopian-esque sci-fi, not really sci-fi. I'll call it more fantasy dystopian drama. It's about quick log line practice here, pitch practice.
Yeah.
The Crack in the Wall is about an up-and-coming elite in this underground community. They've lived down there for generations, chased down there by something, but nobody remembers. It's generations ago. So she's training to become the next leader of this underground community when she discovers a secret room where there's a crack in the wall letting in sunlight, which what that means is that there's a world outside the refuge, which is what the underground community is called. And as far as anyone knows, that's not supposed to exist. So now she's uncovering these truths that were forgotten, or truths that maybe some would rather keep hidden, and how everything she's ever believed maybe isn't true. And so she's struggling with that realization, and still knowing that she's supposed to maybe leave this refuge someday, but it's not everything that she thought it was. So that's what that is.
Were you inspired by Plato's allegory of the cave?
I wasn't, but you're not the first person to mention that after I told people about this story. But that's a really great.
You just accidentally made a tremendous work of existentialism.
I did. I'm a genius.
But no, that's really cool. And so how long page-wise did that end up being?
That one came to, I think I'm at 95. No, it ended up a little shorter than I wanted. I think it's at 75.
Okay.
But it's a first draft, so it's very, 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 very rough. Nobody sees a first draft. I always wait until the second draft to share with people. But yeah.
And is this something you're going to try to, like you said, pitch and sell, or is it something you're going to try to fund and make yourself? What?
Good question. I don't know. This one specifically, Damian Walker and Dan Delano, I know I'm dropping your names, but you aren't tied to this at all if you don't want it.
Yeah.
But they read an older, like 20-page version of it. It started as a 20-page short film script. And they were interested in it, and they wanted to film a feature, and they asked if what could this become a feature? And I was like, I think so. But that was before COVID, and then COVID happened, and a lot of things slowed down and shifted and pivoted, and then I finally picked it back up and just finished it. So, Dan and Damien, if you want to read it, you have to wait until the second draft, but they have dibs on it technically in my brain, I guess, if they still want to do it. But if they end up deciding against it, which again, that's okay, I'll either, I don't know. It's again, I like to direct the stuff that I write, and this story is really close to me, I think, as far as like moral and beliefs and stuff. So, I would probably like to take it on, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I think I'm due for a feature anyway.
Yeah.
So, if it's that one, or if I have a period drama too, something, I'm gonna do something.
I'll contribute to your indie go-go.
Oh, good. Got one backer. Eric?
Yeah.
Yeah? Sweet. All right, good.
I want a producer credit, though. Or at least a special thanks.
I think we could make that happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really cool. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a good feeling.
Yeah, I bet. I wrote one feature, and when I was done with it, it felt like just the whole world was lifted off my shoulders.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I hear you there, but that's a big accomplishment. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Sort of transitioning into the third area that we haven't quite talked about yet is your acting. So that's how I was originally introduced to you.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because I had directed you in that to be very stoic and reserved emotionally. Mm-hmm. And then either shortly after, or maybe even at the same time, I think it was shortly after though, I saw you were in like some high emotions workshop.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, that was probably hard for her to be like thinking about how she can deliver all these high emotions, and I'm telling her don't do any of that. But so you took a class on acting, so presumably, you know, you were serious enough about it and liked it enough to want to pursue it in that way. What attracts you to acting?
Yeah. Acting, so that was an early passion of mine too. I did a couple middle school plays, and then I did the musical my senior year. Guys and Dolls, I was Miss Sarah Brown, which was fun. That was a really fun role. So I liked acting, and I probably would have continued with it, honestly, through college. I was thinking about it. And I don't hold resentment to anyone that said this to me in my past, but I got a lot of, that's great, but maybe do something that has a little bit more job security after college.
Yeah,
I'm sure
we've all been there.
A lot of artists, so I ended up listening to those voices, and I went for English education instead, which I still enjoyed, and I still felt enriched by that. But I'm got into film, as we know, and being behind the scenes and seeing actors in front of the camera, it just made me want to go back. And the reason why is because it's the same with writing characters, is that people are so interesting, and to the opportunity to play a character that isn't yourself, there's something really luring about that. If it's like a taste into a different lifestyle, or if you can get into a fantasy, someday, then, you know, you get, you know, these really cool costumes and maybe do some stunts and all that sort of stuff. So what draws me to it is just the creative challenge of getting into the psyche of someone else, and seeing how a person that hadn't already exist become real, like not just through me the actor, but through like wardrobe, makeup, director, set design, all that sort of stuff. It's like part of that, creating something from nothing. And acting is a great way to help like personify that. You're the part that's like literally giving life and breath to these, you know, these elements, these characters, which is a really cool honor to do that. And I think each character is just, if they're well written, then they just show a really great, new, compelling element of the human experience. And that's, I'm always drawn to that, about portrayals of like, this is what life is like for, you know, different people. And that's always the same, whether it's real life drama type films, animation, or fantasy. Like, the human experience is the human experience. And I like exploring that. That's what draws me to acting.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I think I didn't see it because I think I was on vacation, but I saw you were in
That forced PTO, that vacation?
Yeah, I might have been on that vacation. Yeah, it's weird that people actually enjoy that. But yeah, I was gone for some reason. I don't remember. It might have been that. But you had acted in, I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I did my research, so I think I'm right. I think it was called like Life at the Lake or something like that.
Yes.
It was like a horror.
Yep.
And that won whatever competition it was made for.
50-50.
50-50, yep. And so I guess I'll let you sort of talk about that movie in general, but more specifically, you know, after having written and directed your own movies now, is it different going back into acting where maybe you think like, oh, but I would direct this character this way, and this isn't how the director is telling me to do it, or something like that. Yeah. Sort of talk about that,
Yeah. Well, It's funny to mention that because I've definitely been on the other side, behind the camera watching actors and thinking like, oh, they made that decision. Well, if I was acting, I would do it this way. So I've done it that way too. Now, they were still great performances, but you can't help but think like, well, if I did that, I would do it differently. So in an acting position, so in Life at the Lake, using that example, Tessa was the director for that, and she did a fantastic job. It's kind of, I mean, I don't think I did that really that much as an actor.
Yeah.
But it may have been partly because, one, because that genre of film isn't really my cup of tea, if anybody knows. I don't really like horror films that much. I don't mind working on them, but
yeah, I was gonna say you work with
films
Wes all the time.
I know, we laugh about that all the time. It's like, I keep dragging you on my films, but I know you're not a horror person. But so that example is different. I mean, I don't know. I think I don't do that as much as an actor necessarily. Like it being a director and working with directors. I can tell, I say this like I've been on a ton of stuff. I haven't been on a ton of stuff yet. But I think I'd be able to tell if I were working with a director that didn't know how to work with actors or didn't know how to work with their other departments. I think that since I am a director and have seen, even an assistant director, I've seen what those really good director-department relationships look like. I think if I were an actor and saw a director that didn't have those qualities, then I would know and maybe think about how I would be able to do it. Maybe better, maybe not. But otherwise, I don't think so. Because when I'm acting, it's a very different world to act. And when I'm acting, I'm just like allowing myself to be an actor. What's hard as an actor is instead of like thinking if I were directing this, it's hard to let myself just be an actor because I've been behind the camera so much. So like wanting to, feeling like I should be helping somehow, but that's not really my job necessarily when I'm acting. So like I'm allowed to sit and wait, which is, as an AD, listen, if you're used to being an AD and now you're an actor and you're allowed to just sit there, that's hard. It's like, but yeah, I'm getting a little off topic, but
no, that's great.
That's basically where I end up with that, is I more have to remind myself that I can just be an actor when I'm acting rather than being an actor plus like, can I move these sandbags for you type of thing. I mean, I'm always down for helping with like cleanup and stuff, but as far as like when they're setting up the scenes or what have you and those wait times between, reminding myself that it's okay to not help with that.
Yeah, so that's really interesting to hear, because I can't act at all. I've tried. Actually, the last time I tried was in a movie opposite Tessa. And I actually did okay in that because it was mostly just arguing with Tessa the whole time, which is something that is easy to do for me.
To argue?
Yeah. Because we
Nice.
disagree on a lot of things.
Sure.
Yeah. But so I'm always interested to hear like an actual actor with talent, what their sort of their mindset is. Because I don't know. I mostly see myself as a writer, director also, and so I don't know. But yeah, that was really interesting. You really went into it, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's fun. And Life at the Lake, that was the first time I've ever done like a monster acting thing.
Oh, you were a monster in it?
Yeah, I was the lake monster in it.
Nice.
So if you didn't know that, this nice sunshine was the lake monster. But I just wanted to say that was an interesting, different kind of acting too, because there weren't lines. It was all just like wardrobe and makeup, and so I had to act just with like my body and moving, being creepy in my movements, which was a challenge. I recommend it to everybody if they get the chance, just because I learned a lot about portraying without my voice and without my face either, really necessarily, was yeah, it was interesting. I think everybody should try it.
Yeah, I got to figure out a way to
cool.
watch that. I want
Yeah.
to see you as a monster.
Yeah. Apparently, okay. Also, I'm glad that people have seen it and they'll come up and they'll say that it was really good and that was really scary, which is good to hear because since I played the monster, I'm watching it and it did look really good and I love it, but also I know that that's me playing the monster.
Sure, yeah.
So the effect of the horror and of the like eeriness is lost completely on me since I know that's me playing that, which is really funny. So I'm glad that other people can tell me it's scary because I just watch it and I go, that's me. I'm not scary.
Yeah, that's funny how that works because I remember you were in I think it was a short film, and I think it was Wes, at least Wes who wrote it, and he had like all these missing people.
Oh yeah.
Flyers stapled to something, and I was just watching, and I'm like, that's Danna.
It's me. I'm missing.
It's just kind of like weird when you work with people and then you see them pop and you're like, no, it's like that Leonardo DiCaprio meme.
Oh,
if you've ever
yes.
seen that. Yeah. But yeah, well, that's cool that you got to be a part of that. I'm gonna have to try to figure out a way to watch that.
Yeah.
But
it might be out
oh,
on YouTube, on Black Hat Media. Tessa has a YouTube, possibly. I think it. Well, maybe not. I don't know. I'd have to get back to you.
Yeah.
on that. Yeah.
I'll search for it, see if it's there. But a film that we've mentioned a couple of times, and that the clip we played at the beginning is Dear Jenna. And now I'm not a person that indulges in flattery too often, so you can take this as the honest truth.
Okay.
I actually thought that was the best movie of Z-Fest last year.
Thank you. Oh, that's good praise. Thank you.
So that was my favorite one, and I'll briefly tell you why I thought that.
Okay. Yes.
It's because I think in short film format, human drama is the toughest genre to do. Because whereas with something like horror, you can have like a creature, you can have an atmosphere that sort of sustains the movie. You don't really need a lot of character development or emotion. Like the interest is in the fright factor.
Yep.
And like fantasy, sci-fi, like there's these extracurricular things that you can be entertained by.
Yes.
With human drama, it's like you have to establish some kind of emotional relatability to the audience, some kind of interesting drama in 7 minutes, because you have nothing else to rest on. You don't have effects, you don't have set pieces, all these different things. And so I see so many short films that try this human drama that fail just because in that short amount of time I don't gather a relationship with the characters. I don't gather a sympathy. There's not enough context given or something like that. Like I just don't get invested in it by the time it's over.
Totally.
But with Dear Jenna, I did, and I found myself really emotionally invested in the characters. So I thought you did a great job with that.
Thank you.
And it should have won Best Picture or whatever, number one,
Thanks.
whatever award it has.
I think so too.
But you did win some awards for it.
Yeah.
I'll let you say what awards you
Yeah,
won for it because I
sweet.
don't remember all of them. But yeah.
For sure. We had a couple of really great nominations. The ones we walked away with, we made top 10, which just making top 10 itself was really sweet. And then within the top 10, we walked away with 7th place. And there were a lot of teams that year.
Oh, yeah,
so
there were
that
like 80.
Yeah, so that was really sweet to walk away with even just 7th place. And then besides that, I was honored and humbled to receive the Strong Female Filmmaker Award from that film as well. And that one is a really sweet award to even be nominated for because it's not something that you throw your name in the hat for necessarily. It's an award that the judges watch and you stand out to them, and that's why they pull you. It's not like I didn't go, "Ooh, I'd love to be nominated for or considered for strong female filmmaker. I'm gonna, just throw my name in the hat." So winning that award and being nominated and then winning that award was just really, really sweet, and it felt really good. And I was up there with really strong other amazing female filmmakers, and I was just, it's a sweet thing. I knew that that was a newer award that was started, I think, just a couple years ago. And when I heard about it, I knew that eventually I wanted to get there, and then I got there. So it was sweet. There's nothing like as encouraging to keep doing what you're doing than something like that, because it, other people are seeing it, and I had really great women on my team, and also non-women, and just I had a great team, and they helped support and lift me and my story up to get to that point. So I don't just accept it for me, I accept it for everybody. But yeah, that was sweet. That was a high I rode for a very, very, very long time. And I got some cool benefits out of it, like a class with Film North, which I did a screenwriting class, and
Wow. Nice.
Membership with Minnesota, the women's film Minnesota. Gosh, sorry guys. But yeah, it was all really, really cool. It was a good, successful year, I would say.
Yeah. So congratulations on winning that.
Thank you. Gonna keep coming back stronger.
Yeah. So I actually have a grievance with just the concept of that award, and I have to be careful here so as not to misinterpret what I'm saying, because I think that you should have won Best Director overall, or Best Filmmaker overall, because I thought you made the best movie, and I thought it was your sister, right? You directed her really well,
yeah.
and she did a really good job. And was it Rihanna? Rihanna, yeah. I haven't worked with her yet, but I know of her, and she's
very talented,
really good. Yeah.
And Megan too. She gets more screen time in the extended version. I'm so excited because she killed it too.
Megan, what's her last name?
She gets credit as Megan Pia, but
Okay.
she works as Megan Ockenthaler too.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I recognize that last name. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I understand the trend of the industry and the competitions and things like that is to put more focus on, sort of underrepresented groups. But at the same time, and I've struggled with this as a person with epilepsy, so a person with a disability that had, I got acknowledged by like the Pioneer Press as like first filmmaker with a disability to do something. It's
sure.
like I want to compete with people outside the context of a demographic that I fit into, or a identity characteristic, or an individual identity characteristic. Like I don't want to necessarily compete against other disabled filmmakers. I'll compete against them too, but I want to compete overall with everybody.
Right. Yep. And
so I'm just kind of curious as to your thoughts on that, of like, obviously it's still very impressive that you won. It's very impressive for anybody to win in a designated category, but I just, like, to me, that's how I've always felt, is like, I don't know, I want to compete with everybody, not just this centralized identity characteristic.
Right.
What are your thoughts
Yeah.
overall on that?
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely see what you're saying. And I would agree with definitely a lot of that. There were some, and this is going to sound really like pious, but I was kind of shocked that with where we ended up, like being in the top 10 and all these other things, that there were some nominations that I was surprised we didn't, that we didn't make it for. Like Ellie, my DP, didn't make it in for cinematography, and I thought she did great, and like set design and stuff. But and I would have been, I mean, it would have been sweet to be that for director too. And lost my train of thought. Trying to keep track of when the brain thinks it's like. But I think ultimately I agree with you 100%. I would love to have been considered like, if I'm I got strong female filmmaker, but that shouldn't, why does that have to feel different than being just a strong filmmaker? And I think that where maybe society is, this is maybe a cop-out a little bit, but where certain demographics, like women filmmakers, don't like naturally get the same type of consideration, maybe. I'm not saying anything about CFest or the judges or anything, but if a category like that needs to be created in order to recognize more of these people that maybe aren't recognized, then I think then that fits and that's helpful for right now. But ultimately, long term, I would, like you're saying, I would like to be considered within the general pool of filmmakers and be in the consideration for best director with the other directors instead of best female director. It's a really interesting dichotomy of, yes, this is cool because like we're getting seen, but also like we're getting seen still separately. It's I don't know if I super have a solid answer on that.
Yeah.
But
well, and I think you said no statement on Z-Fest or the judges, which I would agree with you. It's nothing that they're following the trends of the industry, which is to make these individualized categories.
Right.
And to me, I've often wondered if that's really doing what I think the motivation of doing that is, or if it's, I don't know, yeah, you're right. It's sort of hard to articulate what exactly I'm saying, but I think you get it. It's like, and it could just be because the Dear Jenna was my favorite movie, and I wanted to see you win for it.
Thank you.
But like honestly, compared to the other movies, I thought you should have been best director, certainly at least nominated. And yeah, it just seems kind of reductionist to not put you up against some of those other people. So, but yeah, it's nothing against Z-Fest and the judges, who all do a fantastic job and are really cool people. I know some of them; they're really cool. So, and they do a great job with their festival every year, and it's a lot of fun. So,
yeah. That's a good question, though. I would say, to summarize my scattered of thoughts, I'm very thankful and honored to receive that award. And I think it's a great award if it's maybe used as a springboard to then say, okay, well, now let's get in with the big dogs, if that makes sense. So like, thank you. I'm really glad that you saw me this way, but now let me just like get in the ring with the big guys or big gals, or the adult table, so to speak. I wouldn't ever want it to be like all right, I got recognized as female filmmaker, and this is like the end all be all, and like great, I've achieved everything, because I don't think it should be treated that way.
Right.
I think it's definitely a springboard towards something else.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome.
That's what I was saying.
And sort of tangentially related, something I'd be interested in talking with you about as a female filmmaker and writer and director is, so the vast majority of my work has had female main characters. And I have a long philosophy for why I do that. I'm not going to go into it now. But it seems to me that like another one of these narratives is going around is that men say are bad at writing female characters, or they should write what they know. Women are bad at writing male characters. They should write what they know. But to me, and you can tell me if you agree with this as a writer and as a director approaching an idea, you're not like the identity of the characters is almost secondary to the circumstances that you're putting them in. And when you're crafting a character, at least for me, I'm focused so much less on the physical identity of the character as I am, their psychology and developing them as a plausible human being with human emotions. Do you feel like as a female filmmaker, writer, director, that you have an easier time writing female characters than male characters?
Good question. I am also naturally drawn towards writing female characters, and I think it's just because I relate with what it's like to be a woman character. But I think that character writing comes down to how well a person or a writer can observe or see how people act together. I've read scripts that, and they are written by men, but I think it could happen to anybody, is that two girl characters will be talking to each other and they'll say like, "What's up, sister?" or "What's up, sister?" or whatever. And that's just like not a way that, I mean, maybe, but most likely that's really not a way that we talk to each other.
Sure.
But I think that doesn't necessarily come with a gender related thing. There's jargon per different gender and gender identifying groups. But I think ultimately it comes down to just skill level with your writing and with getting out into the world and seeing how people interact with each other and seeing how people talk to each other. Please, please, please read your writing out loud to see how it sounds, because if it maybe sounds a little silly coming out, then it probably is silly. Should be rewritten. But I will say that I have had experiences where being a woman director has had a different effect on actors that I've worked with, or on people just on sets in general that I work with. I've had actors that when I was on Hidden Falls, most of it is directed by two fabulous men. But I got to step in and direct every once in a while, and just the actors, especially the female actors, to me would say that some of the things that I was mentioning or saying, or how I would direct, was kind of refreshing in a way, just because it was from a different perspective, but from that female perspective that is just a little bit different. And I wish I could remember a specific example, but it was, just the way that maybe like someone might look at someone a little bit longer if they were into that person, and like those more minute things that I could give direction on. I've heard compliments on, or just something that stood out about me as a director. And I would attribute that to my upbringing as a woman. I think just women in general, not all women necessarily, but just have a way of being able to pick up more of those acute details. And I had another point, and it left me. But I'd say that there are some differences. Not necessarily better or worse or anything, but just there have been differences that I could notice and tell.
Yeah, because I bring this up in the context of Dear Jenna, because I felt like the emotions in Dear Jenna, the conflicts, aren't exclusive to women or any type of person. Like, it's dealing with loss, and it's dealing with coping with a very, emotionally heavy situation. And anybody can relate to that who's been through that, and it's not specific to a certain identity, which is what I really liked. And one of my favorite things about Dear Jenna was that you were, I think, at the risk of even making your sister's character seem selfish in a way, you actually showed like a genuine emotion of like frustration and anger at the situation, as opposed to just sympathy. And some people would look at that and say, oh, well, that's a selfish thing. But if you've ever been in a situation where you're facing a tragedy, you do kind of get in that mindset of like, why is this happening to me? This is such a stressor on me, and I'm angry about it. Why are you doing this? And I gotta constantly be and like it just seemed to tap into a level of nuance that I think a lot of other people wouldn't have done if given the same idea and writing the same idea. So that's why I bring up this whole idea of the identity characteristics. It felt like yours was tapping into the more general idea of literally just being a human being and receiving these things, as opposed to anything specific to the identity of the characters.
Right. Yep. No, that's really, really valuable to me. Because I like to get to, it's back to that human experience. Just whatever is at the core of those things. So in Dear Jenna, for example, like the big metaphor, the big theme is just the memory of a person, and what grief can do to that memory and all that sort of stuff. And so instead of like, the idea isn't how would a girl respond to this? It's how would a person that loved this person react to this? My family had a couple big losses, just some grandparents, and I just remember what that felt like. And like, all you have after that is the memories of that person. And I was really lucky to just be able to reach acceptance really quickly, and peace with those things. But I know that losses can be really, really insanely hard for people. And when when someone dies, you're dealing with like regret, but also anger, and it feels unfair, and you're thinking of all the things that now they're gonna miss out on, and like all the things you didn't do and all that sort of stuff. And so it is sad, but just going back to that, like, it is also like very frustrating and angry, and you're angry with them and you're angry with you, and just so it's those core emotion moments that I really try to nail down when writing those characters. Because that's what makes them real, not the fact of like, I think this character right now, it just would make a bigger statement if they were female identifying, or if they were male identifying, or anything. I hope I never ever worry about that, because that takes away from the story, and it takes away from this character that's being built. Because an identity is so much more than that aspect. And so then I would rather build the deeper course of that memory rather than focus on, it's important we have stories about women right now. That's not the point ever for me.
So you've said the term or the phrase human experience a number of times, and this moves right into a argument or discussion that I've had, certainly with Derek, but with many other people, is when we talk about art, I feel like we all just walk around assuming we know what the definition is, because it's such a common word. We use it. We're just like, I know what this is.
Yep.
But if you were to actually ask somebody, okay, well, what is art? What defines art? I don't know that a lot of people could come back with an answer that actually makes sense. And So we'll start there. We'll start with what to you makes something art.
It's a good question. In fact, so some of these questions he gave me ahead of time, so I wasn't just like floored. And I read this question, and I really had to sit and think on it for a little bit because it's totally subjective. But also, it's really interesting that you asked me this question because I did a whole presentation on this in college on what does art mean, because I was in education. We were talking about creativity and all that sort of stuff. And I'm an English nerd, and so what I do is I look in the dictionary first. And to me, and this is important because this is built off my definition of art, is art in the dictionary is the conscious creation of something that has aesthetic appeal. And that's kind of a rough paraphrase of the definition. But so I read that, and I go, well, what does aesthetic mean? Because that seems to be part of this definition. And aesthetic just means something that's pleasing to the eye or pleasing in appearance. So I go, okay, what does pleasing mean? Pleasing just means that it brings pleasure. So to bring it all back together, and this is at the core of what I think art is art to me is just something that someone has created. However, it's something that's created that then later it starts with the creator being proud of that thing and finding pleasure in that thing. That's its first birth, I would say, into being considered art. And then after that, it's just a bonus if you get in front of people and other people go, I like that. This makes me feel a certain way. Then it becomes art for that person. But I think the true core and center of something being art is that it was made consciously. Per the definition of art, it was something made intentionally, and it brings the creator an element of pride and pleasure in that thing. I think that's truly what art is at the core, because if you're creating something and everything is so subjective, what matters the most is that you're thinking about yourself and that you're creating something that reflects you and reflects, your story and your voice. Because I think it's possible for people to create something because they have to, or they create something because, it's just the thing to do and there isn't any pride in that. I think that then that thing isn't art to you, and then the only saving grace is that maybe it gets in front of people and someone else goes, I like that. Then it's art. But for the creator to bring it back and stop talking in circles, I think art is where you create something and you find a way to be proud of it, or you create something because you're proud of that idea and it's something that you find joy in. And I think especially it's art if it was something that challenged you along the way too. Because art should be a skill, it's knowledge. So anything you create brings you pleasure, but also it teaches you and gives you new skill. There's the really rambly long.
Yeah, didn't know I was bringing an intellectual onto this. No, but that's really good. And I'm happy that you go that deeply into it, because the next question from there then is specifically to film. Obviously, film can range from something that's very philosophy heavy to something that is, robot cars smashing each other with explosions. And
yes.
So talking about film, to me, film has always been sort of removed from the other key artistic platforms of literature, classical music, classical art like painting and drawing and things like that. And film has never really held the same kind of prestige. But I think there are films certainly that have been made that warrant it to hold the same prestige. But you have to define what art is and what artistry is in order to be able to assess whether it belongs there or not. So with regards to film, is all film, regardless of content, subject matter, approach, art? Or within your definition at least, is there a defined sort of box whereby some films fit in and other films don't?
Sure. I think, at the very ground level, I think it does, it always comes down to eye of the beholder type of scenario. But I think if, to go with kind of what I was saying, if it's about something being created and bringing appeal or pleasure or like making a connection to people that are engaging with that art, I would say that if a film were produced, like Barbie, for example, I still have to see it. So. But it was a film that, Oppenheimer too. So both of those films, right? They were created and they were made, and then they just brought so much attention, and people are talking about it, and people are, sharing what they saw in that. And like, people don't do that unless there was some sort of emotional connection that they had. So it could easily be argued that films like that, then, for example, are definitely art because they were created by human hands. They were presented in front of people. Clearly, the filmmakers are proud of it, and now all of these other people are proud of it. I think of Taylor Swift as another example that her music is probably definitely art because she produces it. She seems a fan of it, and then she's got tons of fans that are also a fan of it. So if it were to go by those standards, then I would say that maybe some forms of film are at a different level of art than others are. But like I said, to me, I think it comes to the core of, as long as the person that made it is proud of it, then it's art to them. And that's all that matters. Doesn't have to be art for everybody. Yeah. I mean, it's nice to get the popularity or, right, for it to be welcomed and accepted by a group of people. That's when you get like the big artists like Monet and Van Gogh, or like all those things that just it connects with multiple people, and so people talk about it, and so those are like the art. But there's like art, like the little things that people do. So there's the cheater make everybody happy answer. But that's kind of where I land on that, I guess.
Okay, I think that's good. The way I've always defined art is anything made in pursuit of an understanding of the human condition. So this is why I sort of derive this out of you talking about the human experience is I feel like art requires a humility on behalf of the artist to say that 100%. You don't understand everything about the world. You don't understand everything about the human experience, but you're interested in looking at it and thinking about it. Dear Jenna did that for me. It's like it's not taking an authority stance on how one should respond. What if she's righteous to respond the way she does or anything like that. It's like, here is a person responding this way, and we as an audience are looking at her and having to decide, well, should she be viewing it a different way, things like that. But it's an exploration. It's you.
Yeah, I think that's a huge aspect of it.
Yeah, it's you taking a very true to life situation and saying, let's look at how this impacts other people and how they respond to it. But then, per my definition, because I don't care about making everybody happy.
Sure. Yep.
A lot of stuff gets left out because I think a lot of stuff is not necessarily made in pursuit of an understanding or exploration of something. It's made just to be entertaining. Yeah. Transformers to me is just entertaining. It's made to watch robots smash each other with explosion, and that there's a place for that. Like, I'm not saying that's bad and nobody should do that. I love watching Transformers. But I just think that if we're going to define art with certain parameters as having a sort of more profound aesthetic, that then we have to be willing to say, there's some stuff that fits into this category and there's some stuff that doesn't. And just because it's made by somebody doesn't necessarily make it art.
Sure.
I guess.
Okay, yeah. I
You know?
totally see that.
And so I feel like you could make a work of entertainment, be very proud in that work of entertainment, have lots of people see that work of entertainment, but per my definition, that wouldn't fall within the parameters of what I define as art.
Right. Yeah.
And I'll let you respond to that in a second, but I say that in the context of the original question of, it seems very clear to me when you talk about music, classical literature, that there is a clear separation between Shakespeare and Twilight. You know, nobody puts those in the same boat. Well, literature itself is an art form. Technically, Twilight is literature. But nobody seems to identify Twilight as art in the same way that they do a Shakespeare play. And with film, I feel like we've always tried to walk the balance of saying everything is art because it's being made in an artistic medium. But without that strict definition, that's what I think is keeping it from being viewed on par with literature, classical music. So, you know, my favorite director is Ingmar Bergman. I think he makes very artistic movies. He is the Shakespeare of cinema to me. And yet cinema continues to, at least, I mean, maybe you just fundamentally disagree with this concept, but it seems to me to be regarded as more commercial and not quite on the intellectual par with these other art forms.
Yeah. That's all really good food for thought. Chewing on it. The thing that I thought of after what you were saying is I definitely agree with, I think the more that the creator or the artist can be vulnerable or tell a part of their story or like exploring that human condition, as you're saying, I think just from my own perspective, I know it's that kind of stuff that touches me more too and resonates more with me. It's the stuff that hangs with me. I think what's another interesting thing to maybe consider of what makes art or not per the purpose of our discussion is Shakespeare versus Twilight is a really great example. Lots of people really like Twilight. I personally haven't read them. But they, you know, a lot of people know about them and a lot of people have read them and, you know, they were turned into movies and all that sort of stuff. But Shakespeare does still seem to, like, you hear Shakespeare and you're like, oh yeah, Shakespeare, classic, classic. And so then it does beg the question, like, why is that? And like, it definitely seems like nowadays, what has been created that even measures up to that at all? You know, like what makes a classic a classic? And what's interesting, what I'm starting to think about and chew on is another thing that I remember studying a lot in school was art as a cultural artifact. And what I mean by that is that, so Shakespeare, for example, he wrote plays that very much shaped the time that he was in. So he, you know, not wrote stuff just, you know, to entertain or to write, or maybe he did and he did this by accident. Who knows? But his works just truly, like, he spoke narratives on, like, the royal families, and he spoke narratives on different social classes, and he spoke narratives on different wars, and all stuff that was very prevalent to his time that helped shape what people thought of the circumstances they were living in and their lifestyles and the world that they lived in. And I think that I think that's true for other classics, now that I think about it. So you have Uncle Tom's Cabin is another literary example. Just something that for the time that it was written and because of who wrote it, it just was, it shaped, I think, the mindset and the culture of the world that it was made in. And that's why I think we always return to it and come back to it. And, you know, I don't know if there have been any films that have necessarily achieved that. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. But maybe, you know what? I will say one. I'll say one. And it's because I'm a diehard fan. I think Lord of the Rings maybe reaches that criteria. I think Lord of the Rings, those films too, especially, just like they weren't a distinct narrative necessarily on when they were made, but I think they captivated people in a very massive different way than I think films have for a little while. Maybe Barbie and Oppenheimer have done maybe the same thing. I haven't seen them, like I said, so I don't know.
Not on par with Lord of the Rings. Right?
Lord of the Rings is like top notch for me.
Yeah,
Nothing can be
I
Lord
mean,
of the Rings for
the
me.
cultural influence of Lord of the Rings is like
Right.
matched by Star Wars, maybe, and
Right.
not much else.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, and so like, and Lord of the Rings is, it's, I don't remember exactly if it's like the father of fantasy, but like it informs a lot of other fantasy stuff. So per that criteria, maybe, it's just interesting. You lead me to think about that and new interesting parameters of like, well, maybe what if it's this ability to like take the world as it is and then just completely reshape or change and captivate that culture and move it towards something else.
Awesome.
Cultural artifact.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by that, yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it is all very interesting. It's good stuff to chew on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. So I want to close it out because I think we're getting close to the time.
77 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, but yeah, it's been a great discussion. I've had a lot of fun. Yeah, so the last thing I want to end with is any upcoming projects, anything you're working on now or have recently completed that you sort of just want to say, this is what I'm doing. This is what's out there.
Yeah, self-plug, so to speak. Yeah, a couple things that I'm really excited about. One is my friend Jenna and I, we've kind of partnered up to produce a documentary series called Minnesota Grade. Grade is in like how you might say a grade of steel, so durability or quality is more how I'm using that word. And Minnesota Grade it's short form documentary that highlights people that are in or from Minnesota that are trailblazers, self-makers, just like people that are doing the hard thing. So like my pilot episode is a friend of mine from high school who's a musician, and he's self-taught, and he's had to learn how to be an entrepreneur and how to build himself as a business and sell himself as a product. And like there are maybe a couple musicians that are super popular that have come from here, like Prince, and I think I heard that Lizzo was from Minnesota. I don't know if I'm right on that, but otherwise you don't think of like, I'm going to get big in music, and you think of that happening here, but he stayed here to do it anyway. So that sort of thing. I want to highlight like industrialists or people that work in like the trades or other artists or things like that. So just a way to like highlight people that are doing really, really cool stuff here in Minnesota, because cool stuff can happen here, even though it doesn't always feel like it. So very excited about that. We're in post for that on my first 2 episodes. So hopefully those will come out here pretty soon. I'm also in pre-production for a new short film called Shuttered Past. We just did some casting for that. We've got some good people I'm excited to work with for that. It's not for any festival or anything. It's just a script that I wrote that people were really into and wanted to help me produce. And so we're very excited to do that. It's going to include a lot of practical effects, because a ghost lives in this apartment with her, and any like movement, we want to try and do practically in front of the camera as much as possible. So that'll be hard.
Yeah.
But it'll be really cool. I'm excited to go back to just that like old school form of filmmaking. So I'm doing that. I have a couple acting gigs coming up.
Nice.
And then lastly, I'm very excited about this. This is kind of like one of the first times I'm talking about this publicly to announce. But I am, this year, I'm going to do my first one officially in like late April, early May. I'm organizing and hosting table reads for Minnesota screenwriters.
Wow.
It's called Porchlight Pages, or The Porch for short. And it's just, I've recently, through Catalyst and my screenwriting class, have engaged with table reads, either watching and listening or having my stuff read. And it is one of, I think, the most helpful resources to writers. But Catalyst this year was like the first time I ever engaged with them, besides like a script that was being table read for a production. But to hear a script read out loud, and especially if it's your script, it's one of the most telling, helpful things for your script. And I just think they should happen more. So it's no fee, no membership, no rigorous selection criteria. You submit your pages and I draw from a hat, and we find some actors to read for you and invite other writers to come, and you can get feedback on your script. It can be the first draft, it can be the 100th draft, it can be a newer writer, an older writer. It should just be a place like coming to my porch, like the porch light's on. Come on over, we'll read a little bit, we'll get to meet other people, and just making it more accessible for writers of all experience levels and all stages of writing and stuff like that. So
That's awesome.
yeah, I'm very excited to start that. It's been a calling, I think, for me since November, December. I felt very strongly that I wanted to pivot my attentions to that, and I'm very excited to do that. So if you're watching this and you're interested in that, the writer submission form will go live, I think, the beginning of March, where Bronson is working closely with me on it too. We're kind of waiting until around when Z-Fest submissions are due, because a lot of people are neck deep in that right now. But so like once March kicks up, then I'll make live the submission form for that, and then you can submit your scripts if you want to be read, and I'm excited to get that going. I think it'll be really great. And then maybe a bigger writing surprise for writers to come this fall.
Yeah.
So that's all I'll say on that for now.
Nice.
Yeah. So,
Cool. You're not doing a Z-Fest this year?
not my own Z-Fest.
Okay.
I've AD'd a ton of Z-Fest, which I'm glad about. I'm
I
not.
have to
That
compete
sounded
with you.
very like, but I was very glad to AD all of those films. But,
Yeah.
yeah.
Nice. I don't have
You
to
got it?
compete with you.
No.
I do have one.
Okay. Sweet.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm looking forward to your response after this conversation. So
Is it art?
I'll let you assess that when you see it. But yeah, I hope so.
Cool.
But yeah, that is Danna Gilbertson. Very happy to have her on. Great conversation.
Thanks for listening.
Always a pleasure to talk with her. For more on the Film Network podcast, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode.